I invested in a coaching program for myself.
Mhm.
I decided to work with a lady called Ellie Scarf, and she is a mentor and executive coach in her own right, and she runs a great global community of like-minded coaches. So not only if I have had the benefit of some of Ellie's expertise, but I've also been able to build some great relationships with some fellow coaches going through similar things.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Coaching Secrets podcast. I'm your host Rexhen, and today's guest is Cara Bell, an executive coach and retail consultant with over 25 years of experience helping retail leaders rise to the challenge of balancing performance, pace, and people. Through her coaching practice and consultancy, Biddley Retail, Cara empowers leaders and founders to lead with clarity, confidence, and resilience, whether that's turning around team dynamics, accelerating leadership impact, or improving commercial results in high-pressure environments. And it's a pleasure for me to have her on the podcast today. Welcome to the show, Cara.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to have you on. I want to know more about how this all got started. Like, what inspired you to become a coach and then start your own coaching business?
Well, my journey into coaching wasn't necessarily a sudden leap, but a bit of a natural evolution and a bit of an organic journey. So, straight out of uni, I went into a buying head office role, and really head office retail buying offices was where I stayed. And then in post-COVID times, I moved into retail consultancy, and I found that I was always kind of leaning towards that more coaching style of leadership. I found myself instinctively drawn to nurturing and developing teams around me. And then particularly when I was on the consultancy side, found myself more and more actively coaching the business founders and the teams that I was working in. And that kind of led me to more of an aha moment. I was like, well, hang on a minute, I'm actually coaching, these great organizations. So I wanted to explore that a little bit more. How I came to leadership coaching was that I knew I'd lived and breathed the unique challenges of retail leadership in the retailers that I'd worked in. And I knew honestly how tough, how grueling, and how relentless the pressure could be, to be constantly performing, on all fronts. But I also really believed that retail was more than just numbers and sales. It was really about the people in the businesses, the customers, and how everything came together, to create the wonderful brands and the wonderful stores that we, all love to shop in. So I really saw coaching as a bit of a powerful way to, combine all of the great things about growing strategic kind of, ability and building that self-awareness of the people that I was working with to see how they could, perhaps change their behaviors, change their mindsets, and ultimately change the outcomes and the results that they were seeing, through going on a coaching journey. And I really realized that kind of coaching was that missing piece. And then when I had I went down the journey of training to become a coach. I was like, oh God, I really wish I'd had this kind of coaching experience earlier on in my career, and I could really see, how it could help people, to develop to be their best selves and get the most out of, let's face it, what's quite a tough environment to work in.
Oh, so would you say it's been about 4 years and a half since you started your own coaching practice full time?
Yeah, exactly that. So I've kind of been juggling the coaching and the consulting together, and in some cases I work with business founders and leaders in the business, and I'll be consulting as part of the business, but then also we'll have separate time for leadership coaching, and that's specifically for them as the person, as the driver, as the leader within the business, and how they can work with their team and build their team up to drive their business forward and scale it to what they want it to be.
And when thinking throughout the years of like going through the coaching journey with your clients, which part of it do you find the most rewarding since you started doing this?
It's definitely kind of seeing their successes unfold and seeing them go from at the very beginning, the struggles, to kind of the end of the coaching journey, the empowered ending. When they go through, they really lean into it and they put themselves in a vulnerable place and take themselves forward. And it's a bit like, watching a light come on, or that piece of the puzzle click into place. And my greatest joy comes from guiding them over those hurdles, running alongside them to get where they want to be. And it's through those coaching sessions, they can be quite challenging. Sometimes it's about holding a mirror up, and it might not necessarily be the conversation that they want to be having, but it's one that's coming from a place of support and actually helping them on their journey, so that they can make those tangible movements forward to perhaps see things differently. And you start to see their perceived, that thing that they thought was impossible, that brick wall that was there in their way, you start to see it come down, brick by brick. And that can be really amazing. And I love it when my clients say to me, "Well, Cara, that was a great question," or "I hadn't thought about it like that before." You might have that as a podcast host, but I love it when I might be doing a virtual coaching session and my client will kind of say to me, "Oh, Cara, yeah, I'd never thought about it like that before. Let me just have a think." And they'll kind of look away from the screen and they'll take a moment. And I know that in that moment, that they're really kind of looking deeper and going a little bit beyond perhaps where they were at the beginning of the session. And that's going to help them coming out of the session with a different perspective on what it is that they're working through. And I love it when you see people's self-belief kind of grow and you get those aha moments, and then you get those "I did it" moments, like "I can't believe that I've done this" moment. That's really powerful. And it's not always a bed of roses. It's not always like aha moments like every 5 minutes, but you take the time and you go through the process and the aha moments come.
Absolutely. I feel like we live in a world where the answers are cheap, but the questions are what actually has a lot of value. And I believe that coaches are in the business of asking the right questions at the right time to make people think and unlock these thoughts that they initially hadn't thought of. So yeah, I feel like asking the right questions is what right now has a lot more value than just like knowing the answer, because for any questions, like, you can always work out the answer, especially now that we live in a world where there's AI, there's like so many places where you can find the answer, but just like sometimes if you didn't ask the question, there's these unknown unknowns that you might not be able to solve if you just like didn't think about it at all. So yeah, I feel like that's where the power of coaching comes from, mostly just like asking the right questions the right time. With me though, it's a little bit different because I ask questions that help me with my research, so I'm not trying to unlock anything on you. But I found that a lot of coaches, when I make them just think about the journey of how they got started and what inspired them, they don't get to do that often. They don't get to look at how they started. So it's always interesting for them sometimes, especially when it's been many, many years, to just look back at how they got started. So that's the only thing that I've seen that coaches kind of like get a little bit passionate about, just talking about their beginnings. So yeah, I also wanted to ask you, when it comes to the clients that you work with, we did mention also in the intro, and you were talking about that the focus is also in retail. But would you say that when it comes to that ideal client profile that you're working with, how would you describe that? Is it only on retail? Is it a certain demographic, or are there also other industries? How would you describe that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I very much kind of position myself in the world of retail. So organizations, brands, creative companies, marketing agencies, even down to logistical organizations. And really my focus is on the leaders and their teams. So helping the leaders, unlock their performance. Let's face it, we're not robots, we're humans, and we all bring to work, our own perspective and our own lenses. And with that comes our own kind of assumptions on what we can and can't achieve. And also, different communication styles, cultural beliefs, all sorts of things in the mix, which make us and define us in terms of our leadership style and what we bring to the table when we turn up for work. So, what I tend to focus on is resilience, performance, and leadership, all with kind of the idea of bringing out the best, in the person I'm coaching, that's going to have the best impact on them as a leader, which is going to bring their, team together, and bring them, forward on whatever it is the challenge is. So quite often, what I tend to get is, perhaps managers that have been identified in businesses as having high potential, and, potentially they've they're great at doing their job, they're confident in doing their job, but perhaps where they don't necessarily have the full gambit of leadership ability. So it's about them receiving some scaffolding for them to work on their leadership style so that they can then progress within the business. If they're already great at their jobs, it's like, how do they take the next step, to build up, to be more strategic, to be more forward looking, and to drive the business. I also work with, directors who might be a little bit overwhelmed, who might be thinking, oh, hang on a minute, I'm just winging it. Someone's going to find out that I'm not as good as, they think I am, those kind of challenges. And so really working kind of on a deeper level about confidence and impact, and about them getting, that kind of control back, but also allowing them to be true to themselves. Like, I really believe that, we're all different. We'll bring different things to the table. And there's a huge value, in that, being yourself and bringing yourself to work. It's just going to give you so much more energy. You're going to build your strengths, lean into your strengths, in so much more of a positive way. That's, really going to help you, how you lead your team, how you turn up to work, which is going to impact your results, right? It's going to impact, whatever it is you're focusing on in your business. And then another way that I help people is, there's a lot of change right now in the workplace, isn't there? Structural changes, role changes, those kind of dynamics. It's particularly in the retail, margins are really slim. There's not much flesh on the bone. We need to be as agile as we can to deal with, consumer requirements. There's the whole supply chain that can be really tough going. If it's all about just in time product availability, that can be really time sensitive. That creates a really stressful place to work in. And also when you think about things like, e-commerce, even the role of social media in the world of retail, there's so many challenges there, and it's a real juggling act. So if you're a leader in a retail business or within the world of retail, you have to be, on the ball. And there's such a demand to be on the board. So coaching can really help you kind of cut through the noise and, be your authentic self, as much as you can, and be happy, and find, your own bit of joy, in your work, and be fulfilled at the end of the day.
Cool. And so how would you, like, for any of these leaders and managers that are listening, how would you describe the experience of working with you? Is there a certain program of a certain length? How would you describe the engagement with you?
Well, I mean, it really depends on, where they're at. And I have a couple of different kind of training options. One of them is a leadership accelerator, which is really, an 8-week program, which combines elements of training around coaching conversations, around feedback, perhaps navigating some difficult conversations, even kind of dealing with intergenerational. If you, let's face it, there's a lot of generations in the workplace now, isn't there? And we all bring different levels of experience to the table, and perhaps different outlooks. So how to navigate that. And then that's woven into a series of coaching sessions to really reflect on the work that we've done in the training, and then ultimately go on and take action and move themselves forward. So that's quite an intensive program. I also work, I usually recommend kind of a 6-month bucket of one-to-one executive coaching, which is kind of the more bespoke coaching offer that I have, which is really for leaders who may have quite a complex scenario, and there may be things that they want to specifically work on over a long period of time, because sometimes these softer skills, they take a little bit of kind of working through, and really obviously to get the relationship and understand really what's going on, and give the client the space to perhaps do a bit of test and learn, test out a few things and then see what feels comfortable, and work the muscle, right? It's sometimes coaching I think we all naturally avoid things. I think being in our comfort zone. It's a natural place to be, right? Isn't it? It's a happy place. We're all in a nice comfort zone bubble, but sometimes we know that the goal over there is we need to get out of our comfort zones. Sometimes it can take a little bit of time to take the baby steps to reach outside the comfort zone. But obviously I'm here as a coach to support you to get beyond your comfort zone and take those leaps. So yeah, there's an element of that as well. But I'm always open, if there's an organization that has a team and there might be multiple team members that require some coaching. I've worked on those kind of projects before. So very open to having discussion about what the specific requirements are, particularly if it's through a period of change or restructuring.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. When it comes to like leaders or usually your clients finding you, and in terms of marketing, which marketing channel do you see working best for you? And this is a question that potentially the coaches that are listening would be more interested in knowing.
Well, I find LinkedIn to be really helpful. It's taken me a bit of time to get used to it, putting myself out there on a regular basis and, ultimately talking about myself or things that I'm working on, projects, my perspectives, what I think, a bit of value, like what I think is going to be of interest to people, in the workplace. So I really have seen the value of LinkedIn, and it really has meant that more people have come across me. I've been able to stay in touch with a wider group of people. It's meant that, people who I worked with maybe 10 or 15 years ago, have been able to see, my work, and then had some subsequent conversations, which has led, to business. So I found LinkedIn to be a really great platform. I mean, sometimes, putting myself out there has probably one of been my biggest challenges as a coach, like finding my voice and that whole personal brand piece. But there, I have to say that I have, been able to find my own pathway through it, and I've definitely seen the benefits. Yeah.
So when it comes to LinkedIn, generally you're posting. Are you also like reaching out to potential people who would be a good fit? How is there a specific strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I try not to do the old pitch slapping, you know what I mean? But absolutely, I regularly, if I see someone who's got, an interesting opinion about something, might be a fellow coach or a coach in another industry, actually. Sometimes I can see that there's some parallels between their leadership coaching and my leadership coaching. I enjoy, getting different perspectives on things and hearing about their experiences. So that's a real plus for me. But also, absolutely, I've got one foot in retail from my consultancy kind of perspective. So I always want to be hearing about, what brand is doing what store has had a great experience, what's the latest launches, what's working, what's not, what's driving people crazy. Like, is it the heat wave? Is it, something that has affected the global economy? All of those kind of news stories. It has an impact, on us as consumers, but also, as an industry within the world of retail. So, I love that as well. And I think it's also fascinating to see the strategies of big businesses that they talk about, on LinkedIn. When you have the chief executive explaining a strategy or explaining their results or explaining a success. And I think there's a huge kind of learning opportunity there in the melting pot of also, putting myself out there for potential clients.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing all of this. Right now, where do you see your coaching business in the future? Let's say for the next 1 to 3 years, do you have any specific goals that you're working towards?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's all about my business development, right? So I'm all about building up my business and finding new projects to work on and new amazing clients to support. As they want to grow. So that's a big focus for me. As a coach, I am a little bit addicted to learning. I will say I'm absolutely going to keep up my learning journey, and I really want to be, going more deeply into more specialisms, particularly around resilience. That's one of the things I'm really passionate about, and also coaching conversations. As soon as I can, those will be the things that I'll be, really diving more deeply into. I guess from a psychological aspect, mainly as well. And I'd love to, when I was reflecting on this, I would really love to perhaps look at doing my own research around retail leadership and the challenges that retail leaders are facing to, really get under the hood of it all and understand perhaps how things are evolving, how things are changing. The problems today are different to the problems, 2-3 years ago, and how things are shaping up. So keeping my hand in about what's going on and how, people and society are dealing with things, because that's going to, impact how we turn up at work. So I definitely want to be looking, perhaps in 2 years' time, looking at doing some research with brands, which I think would be really exciting. But for now, it's all about business development and building my personal brand.
And do you see that in the future you could also build a team around yourself, or do you already have a team? I forgot.
Yeah, no, I don't have a team. I'd love to have a team. I'd love to, get some bigger projects and get some associate coaches together to really make an impact in kind of bigger global organizations. That would be amazing to do that and to be working with, really closely with like-minded people. I'm pretty lucky at the moment that I have some great colleagues, although, we're not internally within my bubble of brand, but it would be great to have, a little mini team. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Cool. Great. Awesome. So what about investments? And this goes back to the research. What have been some good investments that you've made in your coaching business that you feel like, oh, that was actually a good investment, or it had a good return on it? What have been, maybe if not good investments, what have been some investments that you could have potentially avoided, or not so good investments? And when we think about investments, could be anything: investments in yourself, investments in coaching business, coaching programs, masterminds, communities, whatever you can think of as an investment that you feel like you'd like to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I invested in a coaching program for myself. I decided to work with a lady called Ellie Scarf, and she is a mentor and executive coach in her own right, and she runs a great global community of like-minded coaches. So not only have I had the benefit of some of Ellie's expertise, but I've also been able to, build some great relationships with some fellow coaches going through similar things. And it's something that most coaches, I'd like to think all coaches, who've been through their training know the power of being coached and understand how it can be a springboard. I think one of the challenges is that it's almost like, if you're building a coaching business, the coaching is the easy part, right? The business part is the harder part. So, I really recognised that I needed some support on that. And it's been really helpful to share the journey and walk alongside some really amazing coaches, not in the same field as me, not in the same industry as me, but very much sharing similar perspectives, values, and outlooks, and kind of working on our businesses together, and then taking the learnings, right? Someone works on something over here and then comes back and says, this was great, this was less great, this was hard. And then it's almost like when you get to that stage, you're like, oh, I know that's going to be hard, but I know I can get through it, or I'm not going to do that, we're going to do this. And that's definitely been one of my best investments, for my business. And it really kind of helped me normalize what I was finding really difficult, and it made me realize that I wasn't alone, and it was normal to be finding these bumps in the road, and that was all completely normal.
It's awesome that you also managed to meet some other people like in their community as well, and maybe in the future some of these connections could be very valuable, especially if you're thinking of working with associates, or a lot of coaches that I know do collaborate with each other. Sometimes if you feel like the client might not be a good fit for you, it could be a good fit for another coach, so just refer them, or they refer other clients to you. So it's a very good relationship to have between coaches. And I found that between coaches, there's not really competition. It's more of collaboration than competition. So that's been a nice finding too from the interviews that I've done mostly.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree 100%. And I think there's kind of the recognition that not every coach is right for every client, and that's okay. Like, that's not any fault of anybody, or someone being better or someone being worse. It's just what you bring, and the lens and the perspective, and the journey that you're on for either the coach or the coachee. So yeah, absolutely. I've found pretty much all of the coaches that I've had the pleasure of coming across that have all been amazing. And I definitely think there's something in kind of shared values and valuing, I suppose, personal development and the coaching journey that you share, which means that, you pretty much got an ally whichever way you look.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So right now in your coaching business, what would you say, you did mention business development, one of the goals. What would you say is a challenge for you right now that you're trying to solve for next as you work on your business development?
I think it's visibility and personal brand. I think I've really been working in the last 6 months about finding my own voice in the digital space and finding one that feels right for me, not too shouty, not too salesy, not too, I think it's a really difficult one. And when you make the transition of leaving, perhaps a corporate job, a bigger business, and then you're working for yourself and you have to put yourself out there, that's when you get the kind of the high cringe factor of like, oh God, that's just awful. No, thank you. And I really do want to do that. But the reality is that you need to be putting yourself in front of people and you need to be able to talk confidently about the transformation, about the impact that you have or you want to be having, about the people you want to work with, so that people know they can pick up the phone or they know they can send you an email and they know that you're going to be the right person for them. And I also recognize that when someone employs you as a coach, right, there's such a trust factor there. They've got to know you a little bit before they can put themselves in that place of vulnerability to say, this is what I need help with. Sometimes they need to see evidence that you've helped someone who might be further down the road on their journey than they are, and then that gives them the confidence to get in touch with you. So I really see the value of putting these things out there. It's just the actually doing it. You can always find something else to be doing and you need to prioritize it and make sure you get it done. And that's where, things like the community of coaches can give you that accountability. Like you can say that you will do it, you will post, and that's going to make you more likely to see it through or not see it as such a big deal and just get it done and, move on for it, or find a bit more your own space where you can sit comfortably so it doesn't feel so unnatural. So yes, that's a big challenge. And I think also, visibility, right? Like there's probably loads of people out there who might be looking for a coach like me, but it's finding them and, making myself visible so that people can go, oh yeah, Cara, you're the coach I want to work with. I think you could really help me, putting myself in that position to be visible. And then, if you want to be working with organizations as well, sometimes organizations can be very slow. You might have multiple stakeholders within an organization, and that can be a challenge, navigating that because you're someone on the outside of the organization trying to, come in. And I mean, absolutely, there are so many benefits to organizations working with external coaches. Don't get me started on that one. But, from a visibility and a trust perspective, I think there's a lot of onus on the coach to make sure that we're giving the right amount of information so that people can make the right decisions.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And so right now, and this comes to the final question of the podcast, is what advice would you like to give to other coaches, just like yourself? So you can think of it as an advice for yourself. What advice would you give to these coaches that are looking to scale their impact?
I would say know when to ask for help and don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that there's no coach out there who hasn't been through this process and who would recognize that how challenging it is, and don't think that the people who may be more successful or further down the line of their coach business journey, they've had to make the mistakes, they've had to overcome the obstacles. So no coach is going to tell you it's going to be easy, and it's okay to ask for help. And particularly on the business side of things, you could be the best coach in the world, but if no one knows you've got a business or no one knows you exist, then you don't have a business. Just get out there and ask for help and find, perhaps a group that's like-minded people, and you can share the journey. get the right help in your business. And sometimes, you don't know what you don't know, right? That's the thing. Like, ask questions and listen. Ask for help when you need it, and don't wait. Don't leave it too long. If you're worried about something, or you're not sure, there are loads of people you can ask for, but it can feel a bit embarrassing, and so don't let that obstacle stand in your way. I think I'd also say, be kind to yourself as well. When you want to set up a coaching business, you become an entrepreneur. There's two ways about it, and so there's going to be some tough moments, and I think that to stay the course, you need to almost anticipate them, expect some tougher moments, but don't be too hard on yourself, and make sure that you've got great people around you who are going to cheer you on, and if you've asked for their help, I'm sure that they would probably ask for your help in return, and you can then get a bit of momentum because of the community you've got around you. But yeah, be kind to yourself.
Thank you so much, Cara. Thank you for that wonderful advice. And for anyone who wants to connect with you or find you, they can go into your LinkedIn. Cara Bell is where they will be able to find you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, the website, biddleyretail.com. They could also find more information there. We'll also put that in the description. Is there any other way they could reach out to you?
Email as well. You can find that on my website. It's cara@biddleyretail.com. Check out my website. Message me on LinkedIn. I'm usually there or thereabouts. So yeah, never far away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Cara. Thank you for coming to the show. It was a lovely experience.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.